Appropriations Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee. And when we'd sent the original notice out, we'd had it a little bit wrong. We had the meeting started at 1:30, but nobody coming till 2:30. And we appreciate y'all on late notice changing your schedules and being here. So we'll go ahead and get started. And first on the agenda is the Secretary of State's office. If you will tell us, if you have a tracking document, if you'll tell us where you're at on there so we can kind of leaf to it quickly, it'd be good. 29. I guess the best thing, if you would just if you would go through your portion there and any changes that we need to know about, and then any. I hope that you don't have any. Well, if you have anything you need to offer up as savings, we'll be more than happy to hear those. And then if you have anything that you wanted to ask outside of what's in the governor's recommendations, we would want to hear those also. If you would, and maybe you were going to do this, but on these cuts, like this $10,000 cut at 41.2.7 and $50,000 cut in 41.2.8, if you would cover those two, I'm sure that some of those would be of interest to the members. And a brief description of why that. And if you would just do that as you go through, and then people probably may have questions on them if you finish. Okay. Chairman Hill has a question right now.
I guess I got you question. I think the YMCA is nominal status for the youth participation, and some of the other things that are necessary to make even money relating to capital needs or money. I'm wondering if there's a small amount of money involved in putting on the YMCA. It really seems like to me this is supported by people throughout the state. I know as a legislator, I suppose one person from every high school, one person from every middle school, one person attends the conference. And I know many other legislators do the same thing. I would really, really question whether in the long run this is a good thing for the state of Georgia, for the youth of the state of Georgia, when this is such a minor amount of money compared to some of the other millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars we spend on some of the frivolous items throughout the state. Mr. Patrick, I just have a very hard time with it. I'd like to see some sort of substantive purpose besides, well, let's cut money off in one area and turn it to another.
Thank you. We have a question from Chairman Williams.
In regards to these licensing boards and all, how many of them still have vacancies on them? I keep hearing that they're not fully, members have not been appointed and they can't take action on them. And in that same light, when you are taking these, consolidating this, well, you got it here, the licensing board program all together, consolidate the investigate. We're sitting over there now with this licensing board for general contractors. They're
Yes, sir.
behind, and everybody's breathing down our throat about when are they going to get it. What's the problem over there? Is it that they don't have enough people, or what is it?
Well, let me start with kind of your first question or first statement. With regard to the appointees to the board, as you are aware and as the committee is aware, the governor appoints every board member of all the licensing boards that we administer. We do regularly submit to the governor's office a list of the vacancies that we have on our end as far as those who are serving in expired terms and things of that nature. And we bring to their attention also regularly that there are a couple of boards that at times have a problem having a quorum for their meetings simply because if one or two of the board members are absent that day with vacancies already existing, they aren't able to have a quorum there. Frankly, we bring it to their attention regularly and are kind of at their discretion, if you will, or at their pleasure as far as being able to fill those vacancies and having those boards be kind of fully manned, if you will. With regard to the general contracting issue and how it, in this line item for consolidation of investigative functions, the two really are unrelated at this point. The contracting issue, at least from the let me take a step back. The investigators and the investigative functions with the inspectors that are identified in this line item really don't have anything to do with the General Contractors Board as it's being administered today. That staffing part of it is done through the licensing boards, and the licensing division will continue to be done through that division. As Mr. Chairman, as you and I have discussed and Secretary Handel have discussed on several occasions, I think there are several problems and issues that are being dealt with on a daily basis with the contracting board. The first of which is in December of 2007, the licensing division received some odd 10,000 applications for licensure exam exemption, which dwarfed by several thousand what they had been receiving periodically through this law being in place. Quite frankly, what ended up happening is it's the old studying for your exam in college thing. You wait until the last minute and you try and cram it at the last moment. What we've seen in this area with the contractors is there was this flurry to get the applications in before that December 31st deadline. Many of them were complete and without issue, and many of those have already been granted their exemption from the licensure exam, but many of those were not. There were some incompletions, some deficiencies is what they're typically called, and staff is currently working through all of those issues with those applicants and trying to get through them as quickly as possible so that we can get those taken care of before the law goes into really full effect July 1st.
Well, can we get together on this? And this is an ongoing problem that,
Sure.
and whether it's personnel we need to address or whatever it is to facilitate, because there's a lot of frustration out there not being able to get licensed and that sort of thing. So I'd like to work with y'all to see through the Regulated Industries Committee to work on something that would facilitate getting these people licensed and put people on the board. I guess maybe the thing to do is talk to the governor's office about encouraging them to go ahead and make these appointments so these boards can meet. So
Yes,
maybe
sir.
we can work on it together.
Absolutely. Would welcome that.
Okay. We got a couple more questions. Chairman Smith, I think is your question related to this particular topic? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and recognize you, and then I would like to go ahead and let him conclude his part of it. And it's my fault. I interrupted him, and but if you can go, if yours is on that same issue, I'm going to go ahead and recognize you this time.
Thank you. My question just goes to possible action for the General Assembly. Do we need to extend our deadline again because of this? This is a regulated industry, and this is the one board that has not gone through its process the first time, is what I understand. So we're talking thousands of people out of jobs, sometimes due to their fault, but sometimes due to the deficiencies that we're experiencing with our board. So I'm getting several calls now about this, and I see Chairman Williams shaking his head, but we might. Will you be able to satisfy all of these by, what is it, July 1?
Well, Chairman Smith, I think the question is what do you mean by satisfy? And I mean, and I don't mean to be flippant, but in my opinion, and I think I can safely speak on behalf of Secretary Handel, I think extending the deadline for this licensure would be a tremendous mistake for the legislature. And as y'all are aware, this law started in 2003. Mm-hmm. And it's been almost 5 years now that this law has kind of gone through various iterations to get it to the point that it is today. Frankly speaking, at some point or another, if you're going to have a deadline in place, there is going to be a group of people who, for whatever reasons, wait until the last minute on that deadline to get their stuff in and get the process started. And the one thing I would also suggest is that we have to keep in mind that the licensure deadline that was in place for December 31st wasn't for licensure broadly. It was for the exam exemption on the licensure requirement. Virtually every single contractor who has been denied that exemption has the ability to take the licensure exam prior to the law going into effect July 1st. So
here's what I want to be sure that we don't do. The legislative body has taken actions legislatively with our laws and such as that, but it's almost sounding to me now, and I understand the numerous applications that you're receiving, but I hope the reason that we're not going to be able to effectively deal with some of these is the inability of this board, maybe through not their fault, but we're creating a conundrum, and the one who will suffer will be the applicant. And so I don't think that was the will of the General Assembly. Do we need a licensing surge before the end of this time? I'm curious. I would think more people would be put to problem solving once we know that this is a situation.
Well, I think
Thank you. And I know the chair's getting antsy looking at me, but
well, I kind of expected that there might be some contractor questions that came up this afternoon. The board itself, I think, has taken on a considerable amount of responsibility, and they are scheduling more regular meetings in which the board itself hears these issues. They're the ones who grant and deny and make
but
those
staff,
considerations on them.
I understand the staff is not always sufficient.
Well, I don't know that we really have a staffing issue per se. We've hired temporary staff to help, but we're at the stage in the application process now where it's not just the first run of applications that have overwhelmed everybody. They really are getting into the bottom, the kind of dealing with the specific applications that may have been missing a part of their application and dealing more specifically into the details of that application, which is a lot, it's more time consuming than just going through the first round of the application process to make sure that everything is there. There are questions about relevant projects, whether or not they've applied for the right license. Is it really a general contractor's license that they need, or is it the residential light contractor's license that they need? So there are all kinds of these factors going on, and when you're dealing with over 20,000 applications that have been submitted, you're going to have a little bit of a time lag on being able to really work through every single one of those applications.
I understand that. My concern is that the time lag will be punitive to the applicant.
Well, but we
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Chairman Smith. Chairman Mills, you have your light on. Is that your light? If you have a question, related to this issue, go ahead. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I was late, I apologize. I have 5 contractors in my office, meeting with them on this very subject matter at hand.
Yes, sir.
And of course, they're accusing me about to put them out of business because they can't get their license. I understand there are numerous issues involved. And one of the issues that came to the forefront in my brief conversation was the net worth issue, that a rule and reg had been made. I tried to explain to them there needs to be proper net worth, first of all, for reciprocity between states, so we can do business in and out of state, and other contractors want to do. And then also, if there's a problem, there's some recourse available there. But what I don't understand is why can the board not combine a net worth of an individual with a net worth of the business or the corporation? And as it was being explained to me, that's not being allowed now. I know that some corporations may not be worth that much money on paper because it's pretty much a paper corporation, but the individual is worth quite a bit, and they're being prohibited. They've bid these jobs now because of this reg. Is there some flexibility there that we could help these people out?
There might be. I think, Mr. Chairman, and I'm familiar a little bit with the issue that your constituents have brought up, and that, quite frankly, has been something different and slightly unique than some of these, for lack of a better way of putting it, more typical questions that have arisen. And if I recall correctly, for some of your constituents, it has to deal with how their corporate structure has been established and how they're incorporated, basically. I think what we would be happy to do with you and with the legislature is to talk to the board and see if there is some consideration that they can give to that, because I think it's something that the board needs to be definitely aware of, that there is a group, however many there may be, of these businessmen who are, by the way they are constituted, in a little bit of a different area than what the law may have originally identified or originally intended to do. So I think we'll certainly talk to Chairman Thayer of the board, send him a letter, first thing, and see if we can't get that dialogue started and see what their feedback is. Because frankly, I don't know from our vantage point whether or not this issue has been raised and brought before the board yet, because I don't know if any of those contractors have appeared before the board yet to raise it.
Right. Well, I know these guys have been raising the issue, and they're in my office now. If you'd like
Sure.
to go, try to help them when you get through here. But Michael Sullivan from Secretary of State's office is meeting with them as well, and I'm just hopeful that a little bit of walking around sense. If they've got a personal network combined with their corporation network, that does give a person some recourse to go after, and I would hope the board would consider that rather than just saying these people who've been building maybe 10 or 15 years, just a little niche in the market, a little different. It doesn't mean that they should be excluded.
Sure. And I'll say this as a general issue: those who have been denied the the exam exemption for licensure, every single applicant has the right to appear before the board and produce information to dialogue with the board to say, well, here's where the disconnect may have been. And frankly, the board has been pretty accommodating with a lot of these cases that are brought back before them. I think they are somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% in which they're making a consideration based on the appearance of the contractor before them. So they're not just rubber stamping those applications that come before them in what you might call an appeal. And I think they're trying to find some balance between, as you said, some common sense and being overly strict on what the law has said or what their rules are.
Okay, thank you. Representative Cecily Hill, did you have a question related to this issue?
I've been talking to Mark, and I'll keep this very short, but it might have some answers for him. And I've been talking to Mark this morning, and I understand they're trying to come up now with a solution which will give a lesser restrictive contractor, but he can still do commercial contracts up to $500,000 and up to 3 floors, and only show $25,000 as their net worth on that, and then they can do a job 5 times that, which would be $500,000. And if they go into this and accept that licensure for that particular heading, they can move up to the more restrictive by later producing the financials, but not having to take the test again. Okay.
As you might expect, we talk to Mark and the home builders and the contractors on a daily basis on these issues, and truthfully, I will say that Mark has been doing a yeoman's job at bird dogging a lot of these things, and several of his association members are actually on the contractors board, so there are some sympathies there from kind of that side of everything. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that we can at least, as Chairman Mills said, identify some common sense ways of dealing with some of these questions that have come up that may not have been originally intended or contemplated.
And in Florida, they allow them to do their personal as well as or their commercial. They don't have to distinguish between them. But thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. If you would go ahead and finish up your budget presentation.
Okay. Excuse me. I think I've gone through some of the line items in the administrative services side. I will bring a couple of things to your attention in the elections group, starting with 41.6.10. You'll see that the governor's recommendation has been to include some funding for our voter registration system. And very briefly, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we have a very old and antiquated voter registration system that is housed on the state mainframe. Every time our office or a county office has a keystroke on that mainframe, the Secretary of State's office gets charged for it. We're spending annually anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million in GTA mainframe costs in maintaining this voter registration system that, quite frankly, is probably 10 to 12 years antiquated and out of date. What you see here is funding that was identified as really our first big phase and step in transferring out of a mainframe system in GTA and getting to what is commonly referred to as a web or server-based system that would be housed within our elections division. Over the next 2 to 3 years in which this system and this conversion takes place, I think what we'll find is that there'll be no net ongoing cost to the state, because we won't be having and incurring those GTA costs on an annual ongoing basis. The system will essentially have paid for itself. And I will say also that Patrick Moore over at GTA and his staff have been great working with us, and I want to assure the committee that this is not a significant technology-oriented endeavor that we are undertaking without working with the other relevant agencies in the state and meeting all those requirements and procurement regulations and things of that nature, that we're working with them in conjunction with this. So you won't see us coming back over what's commonly referred to as scope creep or work orders and things of that nature that were well over the estimated cost. We're being very pragmatic and thorough in how we're approaching this. This committee is aware also that we've had some ongoing funding requests for photo ID education and outreach efforts. We had requested $1 million to complete the 2008 election cycle, which for budgetary purposes will take us through the first half of the FY09 budget cycle. The governor has recommended $500,000 of that amount. We're happy with the governor's recommendation, but if it was the wisdom of the House of Representatives to fully fund that, we would be happier. Let's just put it that way. We have, as you probably are aware from the presidential preference primaries, we saw turnout just for these elections upwards of 45%. Nearly 2 million people voted last February 5th, and that's a good thing. I think this coming November we're going to see turnout reach 70% of the state. For our photo ID efforts, that means we really have to make sure that we get our message out to everybody, because a lot of these voters are only coming out and voting in presidential election years. They're not voting every election cycle and not really keeping up, let's say. So we need to make sure that we have the ability and the resources to contact them. As part of the election efforts for the rest of this election cycle, which, as I said, is the first half of FY09, there is identified $400,000 for technical support. What we have, this is the same program that we just ran for February 5th, and what that means, practically speaking, is that we deployed technical support teams regionally throughout the state to serve as a safety net and for our local elections officials in dealing with some of the technology issues that come with our election system, specifically with the servers that transmit the election results, the machines themselves, and things of that nature. We had requested those funds, and we are very grateful and appreciative that the governor went ahead and recommended those, and we hope that the House will do as well. One other item I want to bring to your attention in corporations, which is 41.5 on page 30 of 40. You'll see several line items, 41.52, 4, 5, and 6, that deal with the corporate dissolution process. What that means in layman's terms, ladies and gentlemen, is we discovered last year that although state law requires the Secretary of State's office to conduct a dissolution process for those companies who are not current and active in their licensing fees and their licensing requirements, the agency had not done that since 2003 at the earliest. We discovered that upwards of 300,000 corporate entities had been started in the state but had not been followed through with, let's say, and had been in arrears for several years of just your regularly renewal fees. We have undertaken that process to start getting current on these things. Our estimated revenue for the state as part of this process is going to be upwards of $3 million. We have found that over 75,000 corporations, some dating back as far as 2000 and 2001, had not been paying their fees. but continuing to operate without any real repercussions from the state. So what this these funds, and it's $150,000 total, are going to allow us to do is to complete that process and capture that revenue. And these should be one-time funds, ladies and gentlemen, because once we get current on our registration lists and our fee lists, we shouldn't have to do such a big stab at this on an annual ongoing basis. This will be something we can do internally without really any additional funding. And that's really all the highlights I have. I'll be happy to answer any more questions.
Well, I appreciate it. Do we have questions? If you have a question, there's actually quite a bit in here, more than I think I've taken into account when I set the time for the meeting. I'm not sure who was first. I'm going to go with the end of the table there, Chairman Hill. What's your number? It's turned on. I try to turn the volume. Come on. Chairman Hill, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to make any difference. Press that. Did you press your button there? Is it pressed? Okay, I'm going to turn it. I'm going to turn it off and turn it back on and see if it makes any difference. Okay, try it now. Doesn't sound like it's making any difference. Okay.
See what that does. There, that one works. We're there. Thank you very much. Excuse me for starting all over again here with our technical problems. But the increase between the agency's request and then what the final budget recommendation to the governor seems to be substantial in most all line items, particularly in 41.5. And I was wondering what the differential is. It seems that we're provided the final details on the final amounts, but it doesn't say what the differential was between the agency's request, because some of them are quite substantial. Did somebody come along and say, now we need 2 people in that position, or do we need an extra 40% more? And I guess I'm looking for the justification and the rationale of the changes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The main reason I think you see an increase in the budget, in the recommendations for the governor's office, or the governor made for FY09, is that these requests, and these specifically in corporations, we originally put in our amended FY08 submittal. And the governor's office and the governor's staff, and I can't speak for them as to what their thinking may have been, but we had requested those funds over FY08 and FY09, which would essentially correspond with our calendar year, which is what our corporate renewal cycle is based on. And for whatever the decision was, they did not include these funds in the FY08 amended recommendation, and went ahead, and it looks like here on paper that they went ahead and put it all into FY09. So there has been no subsequent follow-up request from our office to say, well, we really need more money than we had originally requested. It just looks a little funny because we had originally requested that it be staggered over the 2 budgets instead of just compressed into one.
I think I understand.
Thank you. By the way, you can tell Secretary of State Handel, you're fielding all these questions very well.
Thank
So I know it's not easy to stand in, especially with all the material that's here. Can you explain, though, for us what the process is you're going through with Capitol Tours, the Capitol Museum, and the archives? And the end there is that I hope we can reassure our constituencies that the tours are going on. They're just in another department.
Absolutely. There will be no programmatic changes to the Capitol Tours and what is referred to as the Capitol Museum. What you've seen here is essentially a consolidation that is the remnants of what the legislature did several years ago, and when the Secretary of State's office used to also have the Capitol Education Center, and all of these things used to be budgeted together. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, the Capitol Education Center, I think, was given to GBA, and we had a separate kind of program, if you will, for the Education Center, museum, and tours all in one area. Once the Education Center left, it left the tours and museums as kind of a standalone little thing. I think it's $150,000 annually. What we decided to do was to move that function and those line items essentially to archives, which there really is a lot more continuity with, considering what our archives division does and the responsibilities they have for housing documents and artifacts and things of that nature. Many of the things in the Capitol Museum are coordinated through our archives division anyway. And what this allows us to do is to manage the Capitol Tours museum component through our archives group with our archives director. There'll be a little bit of cost savings there, but there will be no programmatic changes as far as the number of tours and the services that we provide from the tour desk at all.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Mills.
And appreciate the job Secretary of State Handel is doing in regard to these backlog that are owed from 03, you said, right?
Yes.
And that's a pretty good firm estimate. You feel pretty good about $3 million.
I think once
coming
once the process is completed, there'll be the benefit of about $3 million, and those funds are returned to the general treasury. Those are not retained internally with our office.
Okay, I guess that leads to my next question is, I understand they're returned to the treasury, but are they going to be reflected in your budget? If you're going to have $3 million more coming in, will that go directly from the fees that are owed? That's not going to go to the Secretary of State. It's going to go right into the state treasury. Then somewhere in the budget we should have a $3 million surplus for 1 year.
I don't know how, from a budgetary standpoint, something like that is reflected from, because let me put it this way. We're appropriated our funding for an operating basis.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, from a state standpoint, those funds would be identified and kind of budgeted on, let's say, y'all's side of the table for your ongoing budgeting.
But you'll be
process.
tracking what comes in
Yes.
to the Secretary of State, which you relay to the Treasury, correct?
Yes, and we have we're able to run reports based on the database of corporations and kind of how they're paying, excuse me, how they're paying and whether or not they're back due and they're delinquent and things of that nature.
Could we get a commitment now, just a verbal commitment that, Mr. Chairman, if I'm back next year, it would just be a nice thing to see this subcommittee in particular in the report as to what came in so that we would know, the state's picked up some revenue here. Last question is, in previous Secretary of State administration, without discussion, legislative members, there was all of a sudden ballots being printed in other languages. Is any of that going on now?
No, sir. We don't have any. Agency-wide, we don't have materials that are printed into another language.
Thank you very much.
And nothing
Glad to
with
hear that.
elections either.
Thank you, Chairman Mills. Any other questions for the gentleman? I don't see any. Thank you very much. Now I tell you what, though, we may need to get some questions to you in writing about some
Absolutely.
of these things, because I'm interested in some of these things. I don't want to. I know we have some other agencies here. We have some people speak on different requests and things. So I want to go ahead but we'll either get you some further questions in writing, or it could be that we would ask you to come back in. We're kind of right now we're at a point we're kind of slowed down anyway, because we've got to go back and do some things with the 08 budget because of some action that was taken in the Senate. They did some things that we're going to have to go back down and work on the 08 budget again. So we got a little bit of time, so we may need to. I mean, it's possible. Just specific questions. Well, let me ask you one thing though. That $1 million that you had requested from the governor in elections, and you said you'd be happy if the legislature fully funded it. I mean, the way you say it, the governor didn't fully fund it. So is it going to be able, with that $500,000, are you going to be able to fulfill the mission that you have before you? I mean, I'm kind of wondering if it's you requested $1 million, you got $500,000, and it would take us to make it whole and fully fund it, then it's not, that $500,000 is not, it's not fully funded. So what kind of hole does that leave as far as your mission that you're trying to accomplish?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think the easiest way to kind of answer that and explain how we've done our outreach in our program is there isn't a definitive number that says, well, if we have this amount of money, then all our education efforts are complete and everything's great. The way we've done this outreach program up through February 5th, in which we were doing a great deal up until the election day, is we've used the funds that were available to us. So if it was the decision and the wisdom, if you will, of the legislature to add $1 million, we would be able to do more to make sure that we are reaching truly the global voter universe, which almost certainly will be coming out and voting in this presidential year in November. If it's $500,000 as the governor has recommended, we just won't be able to do as much.
It's just kind of a subjective thing about where the actual, when you can actually complete the goal. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And we have some attached agencies that say, I believe there's no further questions. I think, unless you wanted to stay to see if there's anything related to attached agencies you wanted to respond to or anything. I think.
Oh no, they can respond for themselves. That's not us.
We do have some attached agencies here, and I'm going to ask Bill Atkins. I know. Did you want to come and speak to us today, or did you just want to rely? I know you've spoken to us in the 08. I mean, I think your request is still the same, but. I'm going to ask you to come up here. The reason I do, because of this web broadcast, if we don't have somebody talking to Mike, then whoever is out there in internet land, they can't hear what you have to say.
Well, I certainly want them to hear what I have to say.
I did want to ask you too. How long you were in the chamber today? How old is your agency?
100 years old this
and
year.
We do believe that you were the first director.
I deny that, and I dare you to prove it. But I thank you very much, and for those of you who were not there, it was an honor for us to be recognized as a 100-year-old agency today. And I'm only the second director since 1908. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I do want to throw myself on the mercy of you guys to say that we really do need pay raise for our pharmacists, agents in the drugs and narcotics. And as Chairman Mills and I had talked earlier, and we were asking for $25,000 increase to kind of bring it up to what the other state pharmacists are making. And I know that's a big chunk at one time, and we have discussed maybe in increments of maybe if you could do 10, 10, and 10, and over the next 3 years kind of bring us up to par as we talked about that. So we'd be happy with that. We'd be happy with anything. I had my CD here, and I was going to bribe you all with it, but I thought if you'll vote for me, I'll give you a CD. If you don't vote for me, you'll have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I've got one of your old CDs. I don't think I want a new one. So.
Damn, a critic.
No, I don't see any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
We're
Mr.
going to help
Chairman.
you in any way that we can help you. We'll certainly try. Thank you. We have Holocaust Commission. Did you want to make a presentation? Thank you. Any other real estate commission? I know we have. Yes, come on. Yes, if you come up and identify yourself, please.
I'll speak to the internet people. Jeff Ledford, Real Estate Commission, and we do have one request that deviates from what's before you, and I brought this in case you don't want to listen to me and just want to take it home with you instead.
Okay.
Essentially, last year we had identified the 2% austerity reductions.
Go ahead.
Last year we had identified where we could take 2% reductions, and in essence what has happened is our investigative caseload has continued to show strength and increase. Also, our licensee population, despite what we were anticipating, has continued to increase. We have grown at a rate where we're likely to see 4,000 to 5,000 increase over this year, which is slightly different than what we've seen in the past years, but it's taken us back to where we were increasing about 2 to 3 years ago. With that said, we are funded solely on licensing fees, and for the past 5 years we have been essentially turning over $1.5 million back to the state treasury. So in what I've passed out to you, you'll see that that figure represented. What we're asking for is that the 2% reduction essentially comes to about $70,000, would significantly impact us as far as if we were to take that, we would have to defer some of the investigative action and some of the improvements to the computer system for our investigative system to a later date, and that would overall, I guess, put us further down the road than what we're hoping to get.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions? Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Well, we do have a question.
I'm looking at the budget here. Of course, I see a number of great cuts, and yet there's in the end there's a $23,000 increase in the governor's recommendation. Are all those cuts, which add up to be far more than $23,000, are all those just redirected?
Now, I believe the $23,000 is not us. That is the agency that precedes us.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay,
when I'm looking at
56.
this.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. We are what essentially we're asking for. Most of these are some redirections. You see, $197,000 being cut and then redirected. That was essentially the appraiser board and the real estate commissioner were under one house, and last year we were split. The 197 should have been under the real estate commission. The population is over 100,000, about 7,000 for the appraisers, and so the cost of running the appraiser board and what is attributed to them was misaligned, and so that's straightening out that essentially a technical mistake. What this is doing in most of these, you see the cuts of the 56,000 and the 14,000. The governor's recommendation would be an increase over what we had last year, and some of that is through the 2.5% salary increases. There is a cut for 1 year's funding of an automobile that we had gotten last year, I guess, in this year, and we're simply requesting an additional, or that we not have the 2 automobiles that we got last year. That's where you're seeing that cut. What we are requesting is that the $70,000 decrease not be implemented for the impact it might have, or that it would have, on our ability to proceed with investigations. And again, what we are able to show you is that we, for the past 5 years, have generated a surplus back to the state of $1.5 million. And while we're required by law to try to balance our fees, we have attempted to do that. We're still, with this increase, would still be generating at least $1 million back to the state. And so we would respectfully request that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have before I get to the next task agency, is there anybody here from insurance? I think I'm going to ask you, because we are running so far behind, I'm going to ask you, I don't know if Commissioner Oxendine is here, I'm going to ask you all, we're going to need to reschedule, and I apologize, but I know that there's several meetings that I think about everybody are going to have to go to around 3 o'clock, and Commissioner, I apologize to you. We're going to need to reschedule but I appreciate you coming, and I'll get back with you. But we've got to move on because I don't think there's going to be anybody up here in just a little bit. So, but thank you for coming. We appreciate it. No, it won't be tomorrow. No. When's another inconvenient time for you?
Well, if you won't put it this way, Thursday, Friday of next week, I'm also out of stuff.
Okay. Well, I will check back with you all, and we'll make sure that we get a convenient time for you. Thank you. Thank you. I know we have the State Ethics Commission here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Rick Thompson with the State Ethics Commission. We only have a couple of differences on the tracking sheet.
You're on page 32, I believe.
I am on page 32 under 4112. We appreciate the committee's hard work last year to appropriate the commission's relocation. We did relocate our office, and we were funded for that. So you will see that we are giving back $115,000. Under 41.12.3 and 41.12.6, if you add those two together, it comes up to $102,000. We are asking to be appropriated $102,000 for software licensing. It will last for 3 years, so it will be a one-time cost or a cost every 3 years for software licenses for the electronic filing of all the different programs we have for campaign finance, personal financial disclosures, and lobbyists. I'm not sure why they were split up that way, but they're both entitled the same for license renewal and electronic filing.
Okay. I think I'm confused.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Any questions? You explained it, and they understood it a lot better than I. No, you explained it perfectly. I appreciate it. Thank you very
And
much.
the only other thing we'd ask for is we are asking for another position to help the outreach and for the educating individuals on the campaign finance laws and the Ethics in Government Act to keep the compliance within the state of Georgia.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for coming
Thanks,
today. We
sir.
appreciate it. Are there any other tasked agencies, the Secretary of State's office, that I have not recognized? I know that there's some people here. I think everybody's here to speak that's not an agency, with an agency, is speaking on Veterans Affairs. Is that right? Is there anybody here that... Okay. Mr. Massey. This is something else. What agency is your...
Drugs and narcotics.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Just 30 seconds. I know you're all running behind, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We have been working with Representative Jay Neal, who had to leave for another meeting, to request $70,000 for a pilot project up in northwest Georgia through the Drugs and Narcotics Agency that would allow pharmacies there to collect information on folks purchasing Sudafed and other things with PSE in it that eventually turns into meth. Right now, pharmacies in the state are required to collect this information, but they do it on paper. And so law enforcement has to go around and collect all the paper and add everything up before they can see that someone is going to different pharmacies to exceed the state limit. This program, which has been tested and tried and been successful in a lot of other states, allows this to all be collected electronically, and then law enforcement will have it right there at their fingertips. And it's happened recently in pilot projects in Arkansas and Kentucky, and Representative Neal thinks that that's a big problem up in northwest Georgia, and he wanted to request $70,000 from this committee to implement the pilot up in that part of the state. So he had to go. I was just here making a brief comment, and certainly will provide any further information that the committee needs.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I spoke with Representative Neal earlier today. If y'all, if he or you will make a written proposal to us, so I can make sure that I have it in the records,
Yes,
and
sir.
then when we do go through that process, that I'll have something there to look at. And otherwise, it probably will, slipped my mind and could slip other people's
Be
minds.
glad to do it. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. I believe next would be Veterans Affairs. Is that right? No, I appreciate it. What page are they on? 33. When's that? Yeah. Starts on the bottom of 33. All right, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I first want to express my appreciation to each of you for what you've done for us over the years. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with the members of this committee in telling you our needs, and you have responded in a wonderful way. We are short. I'd like to introduce some of the people with us today. Lynn Glass, who does 99% of the work on the budget, the Assistant Commissioner for Administration. Mr. Rick Graham, our Personnel Officer. Mr. Tom Cook is the head of our Assistant Commissioner for Claims and Field Operations. And we have with us Mr. Melvin Moses, who is an official with the nursing home at Milledgeville. And we are in a war now, as you all know. It's been going on. Actually, the first attack became on us on September 11, 2001, and then we've been in Iraq and Iran. Our troops have been going and coming over there, and we've been meeting them there when they leave, and we're there when they get back, and a lot of them are very disturbed when they return, and many of them are going back the second and third time. The main thing I'd like to say before we go into the detail is that we try to assist these returning veterans in getting all the benefits to which they may be entitled from the federal and state government. And none of these benefits are automatic. They first got to know about them, and then they got to know how to apply for them, and we help them do that, and we can compare ourselves with states that have more veterans than we do, and we're bringing in more money through claims and other things on our veterans because we go out and actually get with them when they land and meet with them at the National Guard Army. Just give you one example of an office that we need more people. We need at least 6 more people in our statewide operation. Newnan, Georgia, for example. Somebody here, I think, is from Newnan, in that area there. That office covers Carrollton and also Thomaston. And when I came in this job a few years ago, we had 2 people in Thomaston. We had 3 people in Carrollton. We don't have any of that now. We got 2 people in Newnan. We'd like to have at least 1 more person to go out and meet with these people in Carrollton and Thomaston and try to help them get all they're entitled to. And there are other officers in the same situation. We appreciate all you do, and I'd like to ask Lynn Glass to come forward and give you the details on what we actually need to get the job done in Georgia. And I know you want to see it done properly because these men and women are laying their lives on the line, and many of them are coming back pretty shook up, more than any war that we've had. And this war has been going on longer than World War II. Come on up, man.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Regarding our next fiscal year request, which is found in section 47, I believe, page 38 of the tracking document, there are a number of requested enhancements that did not show up in the governor's recommendations for fiscal year 2009, which are all still very important to us. And I would like to briefly present them now for your consideration for inclusion next year.
Okay.
In our fiscal year 2009 request, an additional $328,693 in personal services was requested to add 6 additional veterans benefit counselor positions in Valdosta, Augusta, Noonan, Brunswick, Columbus, and Macon. In Valdosta, we're currently serving over 18,000 veterans, and that number is continuing to grow. Contributing to that growth is the fact that Moody Air Force Base is continuing to expand with the addition of the 23rd Wing, the 820th Security Squadron, and the 347th Rescue Wing. I mentioned the 23rd Wing for those of us who are old enough to recall the significance of that particular organization. That was Claire Chennault's old Flying Tiger fighter wing for World War II. They're not flying P-40s anymore. In our Augusta office, it's a one-person operation, which has seen an increase in veterans, as Mr. Wheeler mentioned, from Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, which has created a concurrent increase in the workload in that particular office. We also have offices, by comparison, in VA Medical Center in Dublin and the one out here in Decatur. In the Dublin office, we have 2 folks in that office, and in the VAMC out here in Decatur, we have 3 people in that office. As Mr. Wheeler mentioned, in Noonan, that office provides itinerant service to Carrollton and Thomaston 2 days a week, which is now causing service to suffer due to the reduced 3-day-a-week schedule that they now have in Noonan. In Brunswick, over 15,000 veterans are being served due to the return of the 48th Brigade and the growth of the Kings Bay Naval Station. Kings Bay is now home to 2 additional submarines on a permanent assignment. There's also a planned VA outpatient clinic in Brunswick that is planned to be open later this year. And with contacts in Brunswick now at an all-time high, we're expecting to be serving over 18,000 veterans in the Brunswick area, again being serviced by only a 2-person office. In Columbus, of course, Columbus serves the Fort Benning community. It's a large retiree community. And with the actions of the Base Realignment and Closure Commission, as well as the Global War on Terror, those 2 things have served considerably to drive the veteran population up. Nearly 22,000 veterans in that 3-county area around Columbus, being Chattahoochee, Muskogee, and Stewart counties. And in Macon, likewise, they are now serving a 7-county area with over 21,000 veterans, again in just a 2-person office. In addition to the 6 benefits counselors that we have asked for, we also asked for an additional administrative person for our Director of Health Contracting and Facilities Division in Milledgeville, and 2 claims counselors in our claims division that is co-located with the VA Regional Office in Decatur. For our state veterans home programs, we asked for an additional $99,000 to offset a 4% annual inflationary cost of operating in the Augusta nursing home. In our nursing home in Milledgeville, we've asked for an additional $229,000 to fund a cost of living increase for the employees that are working there. This is necessary in order to maintain competitiveness in the workforce. Competition is great for nurses and healthcare technicians between us, Central State Hospital, and Oconee Regional Hospital in the Milledgeville area, as well as the Medical Center of Central Georgia and Coliseum Medical Centers in Macon. The failure to maintain staffing, which could result of not being able to provide salary increases for the employees at the Milledgeville home, could have a lethal impact on that facility if state licensure and VA certification are placed in jeopardy as a result. Now, you may be wondering why we're asking for more money for that purpose in Milledgeville as opposed to, and did not mention that in Augusta. And as you may recall from previous appearance before you, the Augusta home is operated for us under contract, or under interagency agreement, I guess I should say, with the Medical College of Georgia. They are all state employees. Salary increases for those employees were part of the governor's recommendations, across-the-board recommendations. So those employees were pretty well taken care of in the governor's recommendations this year. However, the Milledgeville home being operated for us under private contract with United Veterans Services, those salary increases were not included in the governor's recommendations, which is why we're asking for more money for Milledgeville at this time. In his report released earlier this month, the governor, as I mentioned, had recommended $320,000 in across-the-board enhancements and salary increases annualizations, adjustments to state health benefit plan premiums, workers' compensation premiums, and GBA rental rates. Yet only $20,000 of that amount was earmarked for temporary labor in order to meet the additional operating requirements that I've just described to you. That would leave us far short of what is actually needed to adequately support our primary goals for next year. Mr. Chairman, we were pleased with the inclusion of 2 projects in the governor's bond package. However, we're surprised to note that our first priority project, which is an installation of a metal roofing system at the Wood Building, which is one of our skilled care facilities units at the Georgia War Veterans Home in Milledgeville, had only received 35% of the total requirement for that project. This building was built in 1987 with a flat membrane roof, having an expected lifespan of 15 years, which was actually exceeded about 6 years ago in 2002. The existing roof now leaks and has been patched 3 times in the past year. However, the leaks have extended beyond the patches and as a result have now caused 10 patient beds to remain vacant on the 4th floor. When I say 10 patient beds, that's kind of significant because when I made our presentation for the 2009 request to the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee 2 weeks ago, I only told them we had 6 beds that were vacant because at that time that was all the damage that was done. In that short period of time in the past 2 weeks, we've had to close 4 more because the leaks are continuing to expand. Due to the urgency to stop these leaks as soon as possible, use of VA grant funding for this project is not feasible, as the project needs to begin as near the beginning of fiscal year 2009 as possible. The project cannot be executed with the proposed $240,000 as reflected in the bond and the governor's bond package recommendations, as a total of $680,000 is actually needed to complete this requirement. Also not included at all in the bond package was our second priority project, which is expansion of the Georgia Veterans Memorial Cemetery in Milledgeville. This is a project that will be eligible for 100% federal VA grant funding. However, the design and grant approval process for VA funds for cemetery projects is 12 to 15 months, which is longer than the usual lead time that's required for projects of this type. Available pre-placed burial vaults are fast being used up, and at the current rate of 16 burials per month will be exhausted in approximately 2 years, around the 2010 time period. Failure to fund this project now would delay the planning and design of the Phase 2 expansion and could result in the disappearance of casket burials or casket burial space by that time. I believe we've already provided you with an executive summary, which summarizes my remarks for our requirements for fiscal year 2009. To assist you in your consideration, I would ask that you please not hesitate to call on me at any time should you have any questions or require any additional information concerning our request. Mr. Chairman, this completes my formal remarks. I'll be prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Are there any questions from the members? I don't see any questions. If you could stand by, I know that we have, and I'm going to have to ask you to do it very quickly. We have a couple of people that wanted to present to us. And I would like for you, in case there are questions for you after those presentations, I'd like you to make yourself available if you would. I wanted to ask, first of all, I know that you want, Mr. Clayton, did you want to make a presentation? If you could, but it needs to be, it needs to be pretty, we've got to get out of here because we've got to get to some meetings, I think, about every member up here. Now you need to come to the mic so it'll be on the internet broadcast. Now, you had made a presentation to us during the 2008 hearings, so you can be very brief, but I do want the subcommittee members to have their memory, all of our memories jogged about it, and I do want to know, as with all these, any requests, I want to know how, what the agency's perspective on it is. So if you just give us a real quick little overview.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Ned Hunter. I'm the CEO of Stratazon Corporation, Atlanta, Georgia. We're a veteran-owned small business. Okay. And we developed a product called TurboVet, like TurboTax. And TurboVet has been in the making for about 3 years, and we've been working with the Commonwealth of Virginia to launch TurboVet, which, as it implies, is going to facilitate veteran service organizations and state workers in getting that claim assembled in order to present to the federal adjudicators. I presented before congressional staff on November 6th, was testified before Congress on January 29th.
Okay.
With,
I want to interrupt. I don't mean to be
All right.
rude, but now, how much would your request be? How much to do what you want to do
Yes,
in
sir.
the 09 budget? What would be the request for?
The 09 budget requested $350,000.
And that would be something that would have to be come up again.
Annualized, yes, sir.
Annualized. Okay. I'm going to, and you made a presentation before, and believe me, I don't mean to be rude at all.
Not
We
at
just
all.
have a time constraint. I just wanted to ask if the agency did have any. If you do want to say anything, I'm not asking you to, but if you do have anything you want to say about this proposal over there. Okay, then that's sufficient then. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That will definitely suffice. We do have another presentation, and I think we can just about work this in the time frame. If y'all would like to come up and make a. I will ask you, even for these brief remarks, I'm going to ask you to come to the mic. I'm sorry, because you know what? I'll get jumped on if I don't ask you to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm John Howell with the Georgia Healthcare Association, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak before the committee, but we thought Commissioner Wheeler and Mr. Glass did an outstanding job of describing what we're trying to do down in Milledgeville, and I have Mr. Melvin Moses with United Veteran Services with me today, and we just wanted to be a resource for the committee. If y'all had any questions for us, feel free to use us as a resource going down the line as you make your budget recommendations.
Okay, very good. Any questions, comments from the subcommittee? Okay, once. All right, no questions with that. Well, I appreciate you all coming so much. I really do. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned.